Listen, God bless you. My name is Rodriguez Pickens from the Out of Body Experience video. I believe that God has given me a message for the nation of men, a very powerful dream. And if you listen and take heed, I believe that it has the power to save. God had gave me the dream on August 29th at 6 a.m. And he gave me a dream. I was in a big house. And the house was more of a party environment. It was a party setting. The lights were dim. I'm sitting on the couch, and there was men and women couples sitting around the couches around the entire room. And upstairs, there were many rooms, and in each room, there was a different couple in there. So this dream was more like a place where fantasies get fulfilled. And so whatever your fantasy was mentally or deep in your heart, this was the place where all of those were fulfilled. And very dark. And in the midst of me observing where I was, I heard a knock on the door. And so I get up. I open the door, and outside of the door were a line full of women. And I had a choice to invite them in or to make them stay outside. So I ended up inviting them in. And when all the women came in, I noticed that one of the women was actually my fantasy. I approached her. I didn't have to talk. I didn't have to run game. I didn't have to say any words to her. She willingly grabbed my hand, and we began to sit down. So she grabs my hand, and we go to the couch and take a seat. And in the middle of me talking to her, she takes off all her clothes. And I did not know it was going to turn this fast. And so, and I remember her telling me these words. She said, "Come, taste of my flesh. It's sweet." And I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "Come, taste of my flesh. It's sweet." And so I had a decision to make, and I ended up giving in. And so I tasted of her flesh, and I said, "Oh my goodness!" I said, "It's sweet." And at the moment that I tasted of her flesh, my perversion went to a level that I've never thought it could go. And I knew my perversion had went to a crazy and very deadly place, because in the middle of me tasting of her flesh, I found out that she had a male private area and a female private area. And at the point when I saw it, because I was so perverted, I didn't care. I said, and matter of fact, my exact words were, "It don't matter. I came this far already. I ain't gonna worry about it." So I continue to give in, and I continue to eat of her flesh, and because the sweetness was very enticing. And so at that moment, keep in mind that whatever your fantasy was, the woman would fulfill. And so the women all around the room, even upstairs with the men, whatever they thought in their mind, whatever fantasy they envisioned in their mind, the woman did without them asking. And so we get to a point now where me and the woman was getting more intimate. And whatever was on my mind, she manifested. Whatever I thought, that's what she did. And so in the middle of me going down such a sinful path, I heard a great thunder outside. And the thunder was so loud that it woke me up out of my sleep in sin. And so I came to myself, and I went to the door because I was afraid of what this sound was. And so I go to the door, and I open up the door, and in the middle of the skies was a gray smoke that was covering up the skies. And when I first saw it, it terrified me because I didn't know what this was. I've never seen the smoke go across the skies. It looked like it was trying to cover the skies. And so I called my dad, and I said, "Dad," and in the dream, he was a police officer. And I said, "Dad, have you heard about or seen what's going on in the skies?" And my dad's words were, "Son, it's okay. They're fixing it. It'll be all over soon." He said, "Don't go outside. Just close the door." I said, "Okay." So, of course, I'm shutting the door, and I'm turning back around, and because I'm ready to tell all the men and women about what's going on outside. And so the moment I turn around, all the women were gone. And so I thought I was losing my mind because I'm standing at the door, the only way in and the only way out. And I turned around, all the women gone. And I knew it was crazy because all the men that were upstairs came running downstairs because they asked, what's going on? All the women disappeared. And I thought I was losing my mind. And so everybody in the house terrified. And so I go by the stairs and I see my son crawling down the stairs. And so I would get him, I pick him up. And I hear a whole bunch of screaming going on outside. And so I grab my son and I go outside, even though my dad told me not to. I go outside with my son on my shoulder. And the moment I walk outside of the door, a mighty wind blew and rushed against my body, which caused me to fall. And I end up throwing my son in the air. And the moment I threw him in the air, he vanished. He vanished in the middle of nowhere. And I began to scream and cry out, where's my son? Where's my son? Have anybody seen my son? And nobody paid me attention because everybody was already panicking outside. We didn't know what was going on. But when I looked at the skies, that little piece of smoke that I saw was just the beginning. The little small smoke, it actually began to cover the entire skies. And it was very dark. And people were screaming, they were panicking. And I was like, what's going on? And I heard there was one person in the crowd that was crying. And I said, hey, what's going on? And the man said, man, we messed up. We messed up. I said, what you mean we messed up? He said, Jesus came back. He came back and he took his people. We got left behind. And I immediately ran into the middle of the street and yelled, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I cried out so loud, Jesus, Jesus. And to the point I began to cry. I was like, Jesus, Jesus. I'm like, Jesus. And I could see the glow of the presence of God in the sky, but it looked like it was leaving. And the more the Spirit of God was being uplifted from the earth, the colder and darker the earth got. And I kept crying out, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I kept calling his name, and I was crying. It was like he heard me, but he ignored me. And I said, Lord, this is a dream. This is a dream. This is a dream. I was like, wake up, wake up, wake up. But I could not wake up. I was pitching man, scratching myself. I was doing whatever I could to wake up, but I couldn't wake up. And so I fell on my face and cried out to Jesus, Lord, Jesus, please wake me up, wake me up. And I could not wake up for nothing. And when I stopped trying, I ended up waking up. And when I woke up, I cried so bad because I thought I was still in the dream. And I woke up and I was crying out, and my wife came to assist me and try to get me to come to myself because I thought I was still in a dream. I thought I was left behind. And I began to cry out. And the moment I began to cry out, I heard the Lord speak to me. He said, son, do you remember when you kept calling my name? I said, yes, Lord. He said, you kept calling my name because you wanted to repent, but you couldn't. I said, yes, Lord. He said, son, and when he told me this word, I fell to my face and cried out. He said, son, repentance don't seem like it's a gift until it's taken away from you. I immediately fell to the floor and cried out because the moment I wanted to repent, it was too late. I said, Lord, why did you give me this dream? I don't understand. Like, why would you trouble me in this fashion and cause me to cry out? Why did you show me? He said, son, do you remember the women that was in the dream? I said, yes, Lord. He said, the reason why they disappeared was because, not that they were natural, but because they were spiritual. He said, son, that was the fantasy that was so powerful enough to keep your attention off me until I came. I said, Lord, I said, what do you want me to do? He said, son, I want you to warn the nation of men that it's time to wake up, because if they do not wake up, this will be their reality. I was crying out to God because there was no worse feeling than to see Jesus walk away from you. It was like you had to watch life walk away from you forever. He said, son, I want you to wake the people up. And the Lord began to deal with me. He said, son, the women you saw in the dream, he said, those were the fantasies that were so powerful enough to keep your attention until I came, and it caused you to miss the mark. I said, Lord, what do you want me to do? He said, I want you to wake the nation of men up and tell them it's time to wake up. And because if they don't, this would be the reality. He said, I'm coming back soon, but I'm coming back for a church without a spot or a wrinkle. And the Lord began to talk to me. He said, son, the house that you saw, he said, this is not a natural house. I said, Lord, what is it? He said, this is the housing of your mind. He said, many of my men are here. He said, that's the reason why they can't walk with me in the spirit. This is the reason, because that's why a lot of my men are walking dead, because they're living in a whole nother world. And God began to say, he said, son, he said, I must tell you something. I said, what, Lord? He said, it's very possible to be married in different dimensions. I said, oh, excuse me? I said, no, I'm not understanding. He said, you remember when I said, even when a man looks at a woman and even an unclean way, he's already committed adultery with her in his heart. I said, yes, Lord. He said, did I not also say that if you lay down with a prostitute, you become one with her? I said, yes, Lord. He said, so a lot of my men, they can be married to a woman in the natural, but they lay down with a prostitute in the spirit. And what tends to happen is, because their appetite is so fed in sin and so fed in fantasies, that he said, son, what happened? They try to pervert the woman of God that I've given them to be like the spirit that they lay down with. And he said, but I did not make my women of that nature. And so you have a lot of men, and even men in high places, who have laid down with this spirit so long that they've got displeased with the woman I gave them. He said they're mad because what they really like in the spirit, they need flesh to communicate with the flesh. And the reason why they beat the women, they talk bad about the woman of God that I've given them, is because the one they actually in love with in the spirit, they can't touch, because their spirit needs a body. And so when the woman that I've given them will not convert, then they abuse them. He said, but son, I want you to wake my people up. No more shall they live in this fantasy. I believe that God has given me the charge to wake the nation of men up. No longer shall you be satisfied from a fantasy. No longer shall you walk ignorant of the enemy's devices. No longer shall you be perverted. But today, because you watched this video, because you heard this word, God has given you a chance to change your life. God has given you an opportunity to come out from among them. He's given you an opportunity to be made whole again. But you got to come out of that fantasy. But the Lord told me, he said, son, I want you to tell my people, this is the thing that causes people to miss the mark. And he told me to label it the cost of a fantasy. Man, it's time to wake up. We don't have much time anymore.